In the Russian Arctic, 200 kilometers north of the polar circle, there is a rusted metal cap bolted into the ground. It is about the size of a dinner plate. 12 heavy bolts hold it down, and someone, years ago, welded it shut for good measure. Under that cap is a hole that goes down 12 kilometers. Deeper than Everest is tall. Deeper than any human being has ever gone, before or since. The men who drilled it spent 22 years pushing toward the heart of the planet, and then they stopped, sealed it, and walked away. They did not run out of will. They did not run out of money, not at first. They ran into something down there that no drill, then or since, has ever been able to beat. And what finally stopped them is far stranger than the ghost story the internet tells about this place. The internet will tell you they stopped because of what they heard down there. A microphone, the story goes, was lowered into the dark, and it recorded screaming. There really is a recording. Millions of people have heard it. We will play out that whole story before this journey is over, where the tape came from, what is actually on it, and the one detail of the legend that turns out to be true. But the real story of the deepest holes on Earth is stranger than the legend. Because the drill did find things down there that should have been impossible. Water where water cannot exist. Gold where no one can ever touch it. And at nearly 7 kilometers down, in rock 2 billion years old, the crews found something that was once alive. We will get to all of it. First, you need to understand what deep actually costs. Because before anyone drilled a hole into the planet, men were climbing down into it, and they are still down there tonight, for kilometers under Africa, working the deepest place a living human can stand. And deeper needs a scale, all the numbers mean nothing. From where you sit to the center of the Earth is 6,371 kilometers. If you shrank the whole planet to the size of a basketball, everything we are about to describe, every mine, every record borehole, the entire reach of the human species into its own world, would be thinner than the coat of varnish on the ball's surface. We have never left the paint. Keep that basketball in your mind as we go, because the whole story is a fight to scratch the varnish 1 millimeter deeper. Johannesburg, South Africa. For in the morning, you step into a steel cage with 50 miners, the doors slam, and the floor drops out from under the world. The cage falls at 16 meters per second, a 10-story building every heartbeat. It is the fastest elevator ride on Earth, and it is still not fast enough. Reaching the deepest levels of the Mponeng gold mine takes more than an hour, cage after cage, deeper and deeper, like descending a throat. Around you in the dark, shoulder to shoulder, are men who make this drop 6 days a week. Mponeng runs a workforce of thousands, and the mine beneath your boots is not a tunnel, it is a city turned on its end. More than 300 kilometers of tunnels branch off this shaft, longer than the road between many capital cities, all of it stacked in the dark under a single patch of ground. Your ears pop again and again as the pressure climbs. On the way down, the air gets thicker, warmer, heavier in your lungs. By the time the cage slows, the atmosphere itself has changed. You are breathing air pressed harder than anywhere on the planet's surface, in a heat that rises with every meter you descended. At the bottom, you are 4 kilometers inside the planet. Stack 10 Burj Khalifas on top of each other in a hole, and you would still be looking up at the last one from down here. And the first thing you feel is the planet itself, pressing its palm against you. The rock walls here are 66 degrees Celsius, too hot to touch, hot enough to cook you in hours. This is not the sun's heat. This is Earth's own interior heat, rising from below, the same furnace that moves continents. The mine survives by making winter. Every day, gigantic surface plants pump thousands of tons of ice slurry down through pipes, and fans blow air across the ice into the tunnels. Without the ice, the deepest levels would be lethal in a shift. With it, the air is merely brutal. Heat is not what the miners fear most. For kilometers of rock overhead means pressure beyond imagining, and rock under that much load stores energy like a compressed spring. When a tunnel wall lets go, it does not crumble. It explodes. Miners call them rock bursts, the walls firing chunks of quartzite across the tunnel like artillery. Veteran crews will tell you the mountain shoots at you. Seismic sensors register the biggest bursts as small earthquakes with an address, for kilometers down, in the exact tunnel where men are working. And they do all of it for a ribbon of gold about as thick as your forearm, a reef of ore, 30 centimeters wide, running through the rock like a page in a closed book. Every day this mine moves 6,000 tons of rock to follow that page. The gold in it, all told, would fit in a suitcase. The reason the gold is here at all is worth the detour. 3 billion years ago, this was the delta of an ancient river system, washing gold dust out of mountains that no longer exist and burying it in gravel, layer over layer, for 100 million years. The Witwatersrand Basin became the richest gold field the world has ever known. Nearly half of all the gold ever mined by humanity came out of this one buried riverbed. And it survived by catastrophe. 2 billion years ago, an asteroid 10 kilometers wide, the largest confirmed impact in Earth's history, struck almost dead center on the basin. The blast folded the gold layers downward and buried them beyond the reach of erosion. The apocalypse was the vault door. Without that asteroid, the gold would have washed into the sea a billion years before the first human picked up a stone. Down in the working tunnels, the mountain never lets the miners forget whose house this is. Steel refuge chambers stand every few hundred meters, sealed rooms with their own air and water, built for the hours after a burst or a fire, when the tunnels fill with dust and the way out stops existing. Every miner walks past their lifeboat on the way to work. And the devil worm turned out to be only the doorman of the deep. In water from these same mines, biologists found a bacterium that lives utterly alone, running its entire ecosystem with no sunlight, no oxygen, no partners, feeding on hydrogen split from water by the natural radioactivity of the rock itself. A creature powered, in the end, by the slow decay of uranium. Life does not merely tolerate the deep earth. Some of it chose the dark on purpose, and it may outlast everything walking around up here in the light. In 2011, in water seeping from a borehole 3.5 kilometers down a neighboring mine, scientists found the thing that changes this whole story. A worm. 0.5 millimeter long. Alive. Swimming in water that had been sealed in the rock for thousands of years, in heat and pressure that should permit nothing more complex than a bacterium. They named it Halocephalobus mephisto, after Mephistopheles, the demon of the deep. The devil worm. The deepest animal ever discovered, grazing on bacteria in the planet's basement, in a place biology said was empty. Think about what that worm means for a second, because scientists certainly did. If a complex animal can live 3.5 kilometers down, sealed in hot rock with no sunlight and no oxygen, then the list of places life can exist just got much longer, and most of that list is not on Earth. The devil worm is the reason astrobiologists now look at the frozen moons of Jupiter and Saturn differently. If life can hide in the deep rock of our planet, it can hide in the deep rock of theirs. Life does not stop where we thought it stops. Hold that thought, because much deeper down, in a hole no human can enter, the drill is about to find something even older. For kilometers is where flesh gives out. The heat, the pressure, the shooting walls, a human body simply cannot work much deeper than this. There is one more thing about Mponeng you should carry with you before we leave it, because it reframes the whole descent. The men who work the deepest tunnels are not just fighting heat and shooting walls. They are fighting the simple fact that the human body was built for the thin, cool air of the surface, and every meter down takes it further from home. Heat exhaustion can drop a man in minutes down here. Crews rotate constantly, drink liters of water a shift, and are still monitored for the moment their core temperature starts to climb faster than the ice can pull it back. They chase a substance, gold, that their own bodies have no use for whatsoever, into the one place on Earth where their bodies can barely survive. There is no purer picture of what the deep costs. And Mponeng is only 4 kilometers. The hole we turn to next goes 3 times deeper. Everything beyond this point belongs to the machines. And in 1961, 2 empires decided to find out how deep the machines could go. The 1960s. 2 superpowers are racing to the moon, and, far more quietly, racing in the opposite direction. Because in 1960, this is the humiliating truth, humanity can see galaxies 10 billion light-years away, and nobody has ever seen the layer of our own planet that starts 30 kilometers under the parking lot. The crust, the skin we live on, is all we have ever touched. Below it lies the mantle, 2/3 of Earth's volume, and not one sample of it in any laboratory on the planet. America moves first. Project Mohole, drill from a ship, through the ocean floor, where the crust is thinnest, 6 kilometers instead of 30. In 1961 the crews actually do it, off Mexico. In 3,500 meters of water, they punch the first experimental holes into the seabed. The novelist John Steinbeck sails with them and writes it up for Life magazine. Then the project drowns, not in water, but in money and politics. Costs balloon 9 times over. In 1966, Congress kills Mohole before it reaches the mantle. But do not skip past what those crews actually pulled off, because it was closer to magic than anyone admits now. To drill into the seabed under 3.5 kilometers of moving water, the ship had to hold itself perfectly still over a single spot, no anchors, in the open Pacific, while swells heaved the deck. They invented a system of guided propellers, constantly firing to cancel the drift, that kept the vessel over its target within a few meters. Nearly every deep-sea drilling ship and floating oil platform in the world today still uses the descendant of what Mohole invented just to stay in place. Steinbeck, watching from the deck, understood the size of it. He wrote that the effort to reach the mantle was as bold as reaching the moon, and would tell us as much about our own planet as the moon shots told us about space. He was right. It is just that nobody remembers the hole, because holes do not photograph like rockets. The Soviet Union watches, and chooses the opposite madness. Not from a ship. From land, through the full thickness of continental crust. The target, 15 kilometers. Deeper than anything, ever. They picked their spot on the Kola Peninsula, in the Arctic Northwest, near the Norwegian border. The rock here is part of the Baltic Shield, some of the oldest, hardest, most boring crust on Earth. 3 billion years old. No oil, no drama. Perfect. If you want to drill a clean hole through the planet's history, you drill through a page nothing has scribbled on. Understand what this hole meant in its time. This was the Cold War, and the deep Earth was another frontier to plant a flag on. The Americans had their ship, the Soviets would have the deepest point on the planet, drilled through solid continent, a scientific victory you could measure in kilometers. But unlike the space race, this one was run mostly in secret, no live broadcasts, no cheering crowds, just a fenced compound in the Arctic and a number that kept climbing. And the science was real. This was never just a stunt. The plan was to reach depths no instrument had ever sampled and finally check the guesses, to hold in a gloved hand the rock that until then existed only as lines on a seismograph. For the first time, humanity would ground truth its own planet. In 1970, on the 100th anniversary of Lenin's birth, the derrick rises over the tundra. They call the hole SG-3. It is designed to be the deepest artificial point in the world. Nobody on the site that day, not one engineer, knows the drilling will still be going 22 years later. Understand first what drilling 12 kilometers actually means, because it is not what you picture. You cannot spin a 12-kilometer steel rod from the surface, it would twist apart like wet spaghetti. The Soviet answer was elegant, only the bit turns. A turbine at the bottom of the string, driven by drilling mud pumped down the pipe, spins the cutting head while the pipes above it hang still. A drill with its motor at the tip, chewing rock in total darkness, kilometers below the men controlling it. And every time the bit wears out, every few dozen meters of progress, the crews haul the entire string up, pipe by pipe, replace the head, and lower it all back down. At depth, one bit change costs 18 hours. The deeper you go, the more of your life is spent just raising and lowering the world's heaviest fishing line. Even the mud is an engineering problem most people never think about. The fluid pumped down the pipe does 3 jobs at once. It drives the turbine, it carries the crushed rock back up to the surface, and it holds the walls of the hole apart against the crushing weight of the rock. Get the mixture wrong and the hole collapses, or the walls fracture, or the cuttings settle and cement the whole string in place forever. Chemists on the surface adjusted the recipe constantly, blind, reacting to rock they could only feel through 12 kilometers of steel. And the men ran it in shifts around the clock, through Arctic winters where the sun does not rise for weeks. Year after year, the same rhythm: drill a little, haul up for 18 hours, change the bit, lower back down, drill a little more. Careers were spent here. Some engineers gave the whole 20 years of their working lives. The site grows into a small scientific city, 16 laboratories, 3,000 people at its peak. In 1979, SG-3 passes 9,583 meters and breaks the world record held by an oil well in Oklahoma. The Soviets celebrate and keep going. By 1983 the hole reaches 12,000 meters. Moscow shows it off, delegations visit, speeches are made, the site becomes a monument to what the machines can do. The crews, exhausted, let the hole rest for a year while the country applauds. Then, in September 1984, they lower the string for a routine run, and the pipe breaks. 5 kilometers of drill string tear loose and fall, wedging and shattering somewhere in the dark. Every attempt to fish the wreckage out fails. 5 years of progress, the entire record-breaking bottom section of the hole is gone in one shift. Picture the salvage job. Somewhere below 7 kilometers, invisible, in a hole barely wider than a dinner plate, sits a tangle of broken steel. To retrieve it you must lower a special tool on the end of your own fragile string, feel blindly for the wreck through kilometers of pipe, grab it, and lift, without snapping your line and adding to the tangle. They tried, again and again, for months. The deep hole had swallowed its own bottom, and it would not give it back. So they made a decision that tells you everything about this project's stubbornness. They sidetracked, angled a fresh hole off from the 7-kilometer mark and drilled a brand new bottom third, right alongside the ruined one. In effect, the deepest hole on Earth has a dead twin beside it, 5 kilometers of abandoned shaft, sealed and forgotten, next to the one that finally made it. There is no way to say it gently, they had to drill the bottom third of the deepest hole on Earth all over again. And they do. 7 more years of 18-hour bit changes, twisting pipes, collapsing walls. And here is the quiet tragedy of the timing. As the crews clawed their way back down through the late 1980s, the country funding them was dying above their heads. The Soviet Union was cracking apart economically, the ruble collapsing, the budgets for grand scientific monuments evaporating. The men were drilling toward the center of the Earth while the world that had ordered the hole came apart around them. In 1989, SG-3 reaches 12,262 meters. That number is still the record today. Decades later, with all our technology, no one has ever gone deeper toward the center of the Earth. The hole in the Arctic remains the deepest point our species has ever reached. And you should correct the picture in your head, because almost everyone gets it wrong. This record-breaking hole is not some vast shaft you could climb into. At the bottom, SG3 is only about 20 centimeters across, narrower than a dinner plate, the width of a large pizza. 12 kilometers of the thinnest imaginable straw, punched through solid continent. You could not lower a person down it if you wanted to. Everything we learned came up that straw as crushed rock, mud, and gas. And it was at this depth, 12 kilometers down, in rock hotter than boiling water, that the planet stopped cooperating. What the drill found down there is the reason the project died. It is also the best part of the story. Everything we knew about the deep crust in 1970 came from listening, bouncing seismic waves off layers we could not see. The waves showed a boundary a few kilometers down where the rock seemed to change, and the textbook said, that is where granite gives way to basalt. SG3 drilled straight through the place where the boundary was supposed to be. There was no basalt. There was no boundary at all. Just more granite, but granite that had been shattered, soaked, and changed by heat and pressure. The seismic layer everyone believed in was an illusion, not a change of rock, but a change of condition. The maps of the deep earth had been confidently, completely wrong. This is the part that thrills scientists and unsettles everyone else. For decades, textbooks had drawn that basalt layer as fact. Students memorized it. It was in the diagrams, clean and confident. And a single hole, drilling through the exact spot, erased it in an afternoon. It is a lesson that echoes through all of Earth science. Almost everything we know about the deep planet is inference, clever, careful guessing from waves and echoes, and the one time we actually went to check, the checking proved us wrong. It should make you wonder what else, in the 6,000 kilometers below, we have confidently drawn and never verified. Then it got stranger. Kilometers down, far below the depth where every model said the rock must be dry and sealed, the drill found water. Free, mineralized water, moving through cracks in rock that should have been squeezed shut for 2 billion years. Water with no connection to the surface, born from the minerals themselves, trapped by a lid of impermeable stone. Hidden seas in the basement of the continent, one crack at a time. Where does water come from in rock that has been buried, dry, for 2 billion years? The answer is almost alchemical. The water was locked inside the minerals themselves, bound into the crystal structure of the stone, and the crushing pressure and heat at depth were squeezing it back out, molecule by molecule, like wringing a stone sponge. This was not rainwater that had trickled down. It had never seen the sky. It was being born, right there, from the rock, in the dark, for the first time in the planet's history. And that water was doing something. It was dissolving minerals, carrying metals, feeding the microbes we already met, and quietly rewriting what geologists thought the deep crust even was, not a dry, dead, sealed slab, but a slow, wet, living chemistry set, reacting with itself across timescales longer than complex life has existed. The deep earth was not a tomb. It was a laboratory that had been running, unwatched, since before there were eyes to watch it. The drilling mud that came back up sometimes arrived fizzing, boiling with dissolved hydrogen, as one engineer put it, carrying gases nobody expected from dead, ancient stone. And at 6.7 kilometers, in cores of rock more than 2 billion years old, the laboratories found the payoff of a promise we made at the start of this journey, something that had once been alive. 24 species of fossilized marine microorganisms, plankton, in effect, their microscopic shells still intact after 2 billion years under crushing pressure. The remains of an ocean that existed when Earth's days were shorter, the moon hung closer, and the air had no oxygen worth breathing. That ocean's inhabitants were still down there, pressed inside the stone like flowers in the world's heaviest book. At 9.5 kilometers, the cores came up carrying gold, concentrations any surface mine would celebrate. It might as well be on another planet. No shaft will ever reach it, no technology we own can mine at that depth. The drill had found treasure and proven, in the same meter of rock, that treasure is not the point. And the cores themselves carried a warning nobody expected. When the rock reached the surface, released, after 2 billion years, from the pressure that had held it, it did something eerie. It split, spontaneously, into thin disks, popping and cracking on the lab bench like something alive. Geologists call it disking. The stone was so hungry to expand that it kept breaking itself apart for hours after it came up, as if the deep earth were reluctant to let its rock leave. Worse, the deep cores lied. By the time rock traveled 12 kilometers up the pipe, decompressing and cooling the whole way, it was no longer quite the rock that existed down there. Reading the true state of the deep earth from a core at the surface, the scientists realized, was like trying to study a deep-sea fish from the burst, unrecognizable thing that floats up dead. The planet does not give up its secrets in their original condition. Because by now the planet was fighting back. The temperature at the bottom was supposed to be around 100 degrees, by the models. The thermometers read 180. At that heat, under 12 kilometers of overburden, the ancient granite stopped behaving like rock. It crept. It flowed, slowly, like glacier ice, like cold honey. The crews would pull the string for a bit change, and by the time they lowered it back, the hole had begun to squeeze itself shut behind them. The drill bits came up not worn, but softened. Every meter below 12,000 was a war against a wound that healed itself. The plan said 15 kilometers. The planet said no. And somewhere in these final years, the heat, the impossible depth, the empire above the hole beginning to crumble, a story was born. The story you have been waiting for. In 1989, a story surfaces in American religious broadcasting, then leaps into tabloids around the world. You may have heard it. It goes like this. Soviet scientists in Siberia. The story always says Siberia, it never says Kola, drill past 14 kilometers. The drill suddenly spins free, they have broken into a hollow space. The temperature reads 1100 degrees. Curious, they lower a heat-proof microphone into the void. And they record human screams. Millions of voices. The story's own words, they had drilled into hell. Years later, an audio recording appears to match the legend, 17 seconds of layered shrieking that still circulates today. Radio shows play it. Millions download it. To this day it is one of the most famous recordings on the internet. Here is what investigation actually found. The screens match audio lifted from a 1972 Italian horror film, looped and layered. The 14.5 kilometers was deeper than any hole on Earth, then or now. There was no hollow space, solid crust does not contain caverns at that depth, the pressure forbids it. The temperature was fiction. The scientists quoted did not exist. The trail of the hoax is almost as interesting as the hole. A Finnish newspaper appears to have run it as a joke. A Christian broadcast network in the United States picked it up and ran it as fact. From there it crossed into tabloids, then radio, then, decades later, the internet, mutating at every step, the depth changing, the location sliding from Kola to Siberia, new details bolted on by each teller. It is a perfect specimen of how a story becomes true simply by being repeated, a thing that spread through the crust of human belief exactly the way a crack spreads through rock. And it worked because it landed on a real hole. A genuine world record borehole, drilled in secret by a closed empire, abandoned suddenly as that empire collapsed. The facts were strange enough: 12 kilometers, 22 years, then silence and a welded cap, that a supernatural ending felt like it belonged. The truth was mysterious, so people reached for a myth to finish it. When journalists finally asked the man who ran the real deepest hole, the director of the Kola project, David Guberman, he laughed, and then gave the answer of an honest scientist: there were no screams. The only hell, he said, was the drilling itself. And yet, the legend got one thing almost right, and it is better than the myth. The deep earth is not silent. Lower real instruments into a deep borehole and they record a planet that creaks, ticks, and mutters. Rock cracking as the hole breathes. Fluids hissing through fractures. The constant, low seismic murmur of a world that never fully stops moving, micro-earthquakes rippling through the crust like a pulse. Geophysicists have a name for the background noise of the planet, Earth's hum. It is real, it is measurable, and it never stops. The strangest part is where the hum comes from. Much of it is the ocean, waves, thousands of kilometers away, drumming on the seafloor and sending a faint, endless vibration through the entire planet, ringing it like a struck bell that never quite goes quiet. The Earth is humming a note far too low for any human ear, a note pressed out of it by every storm on every sea at once. Deep boreholes are among the best ears we have for it. Away from the noise of the surface, traffic, wind, weather, an instrument at the bottom of a deep hole sits in near perfect quiet, and can hear the planet's faint internal voice with a clarity nothing on the surface can match. The Kola myth got the shape of the truth right and everything else wrong. We did lower microphones into the deep, and the Earth did speak back. It just did not scream. It hummed. Nobody recorded the dam down there. What the instruments record is stranger and older, the working sounds of a living planet, a 4.5 billion-year-old machine, running with no one at the controls. The screams were fake. The voices from the deep are real. They just are not human. The Soviets were not alone for long. In 1987, West Germany started its own super deep hole, the KTB borehole in Bavaria, armed with newer technology and the confidence of people who had read about everyone else's mistakes. The planet treated them exactly the same. By 9 kilometers the rock temperature hit 265 degrees, far hotter than predicted, again. The hole refused to stay straight, the deep section spiraled like a corkscrew as the rock flexed. At 9,101 meters, with the stone going soft around the bit, Germany stopped. Since then, oil companies have drilled wells that are technically longer, off Sakhalin and Qatar. Boreholes stretch more than 12 and even 15 kilometers. Read the fine print, though, those wells run mostly sideways, snaking horizontally through shallow oil layers under the seabed. Straight down, toward the core, the rusted cap on the Kola Peninsula has not been beaten in a generation. And that word, sideways, hides the whole trick. Drilling down fights the planet's rising heat and crushing weight the entire way. Drilling sideways through a cool, shallow oil layer avoids both. Calling those wells deeper than Kola is like calling a long flat hallway taller than a short staircase. Length is easy. Depth is the enemy. And depth's real weapon, the one that beat every project, has a name, the geothermal gradient. For every kilometer you descend, the rock gets roughly 25 degrees hotter. That sounds gentle. It is not. It means that long before you reach any interesting depth, the temperature climbs past what drill bits, electronics, and lubricants can survive. Kola hit 180 degrees. Germany hit 265. The planet does not need a wall to stop you, it simply gets hot enough, deep enough, that your tools stop working and your hole starts to flow shut. Heat is the gatekeeper, and so far it has never lost. The dream itself is still alive. Japan built Chikyu, a scientific drilling ship designed to do what Project Mohole promised 60 years ago, punch through the thin ocean crust and finally bring back a piece of the mantle. The target keeps slipping, money, always money, but the ship exists, and the thin spots in the ocean floor are mapped. Why bother, after all this failure? Because the prize has never changed. A single fresh sample of the mantle would settle questions that have stood open for a century: how the planet formed, how it moves heat, how the continents drift, maybe even how deep the biosphere really goes. Everything below 12 kilometers is still, in a real sense, another planet, closer to you right now than the nearest city, and less explored than the surface of Mars. Sit with that. We have driven robots across Mars for decades, mapped it, photographed its every rock. It is hundreds of millions of kilometers away. The mantle begins about 30 kilometers beneath your chair, and we have never once held a piece of it. The deep interior of our own world is the last true wilderness, and it is straight down. And here is the number to take home from all of it. Pick up an apple. The skin on that apple, compared to the whole fruit, is proportionally thicker than everything humanity has ever penetrated compared to the Earth. 12 kilometers down, out of 6,371 to the center. After a century of mines, empires, records, and broken drills, we have scratched 0.2% of the way. Everything below that is known the way you know a thunderstorm from inside a house, by listening through the walls. The director of the Kola project said it plainly: we know less about what lies beneath our feet than about the far side of the moon. The site of SG-3 today is a ruin. The towers are scrapped, the 16 laboratories are rubble, the 3,000 people are gone. Wind, snow, and a concrete slab in the tundra. In the middle of the rubble sits the cap. 12 bolts and a weld, over the deepest doorway our species ever opened. Tourists find it sometimes, stand on it, and take a photograph, a human being, standing one thin welded plate away from 12 kilometers of falling. There is something almost unbearably human about that cap. We spent 22 years, 3,000 lives worth of work, and the wealth of an empire to open the deepest hole in history, and then we closed it with a piece of scrap metal and 12 bolts, and walked away, and let the tundra take it. The greatest descent our species ever made ends in a rusted lid you could trip over in the snow without ever knowing what was beneath it. Under their boots, the water that should not exist, the gold no one will ever touch, the 2-billion-year-old ocean pressed into stone, and the slow, patient heat of a planet that closed the hole behind us like a healing wound. The Earth did not keep us out with monsters or curses. It kept us out with nothing but heat, weight, and time, and it barely noticed we were knocking. Think about that the next time you feel solid ground under your feet. That ground is a lid. Below the thin skin you live on, the planet is hotter, heavier, and stranger than the surface of any world we have ever photographed, and it starts closer to you than your morning commute. You are standing on the roof of the least explored place in the solar system, and it is not the ocean, and it is not space. It is straight down, and it begins at your shoes. 6,000 kilometers below you, the iron heart of the Earth spins at a temperature close to the surface of the Sun. Between you and it lies everything we cannot reach, and everything we have learned from 12 scratched kilometers and the echoes that come back through the rest. The deepest hole ever drilled did not fail. It simply showed us how thin the reachable world really is. Somewhere below the far side of the world, tonight, the cage at Mponeng is dropping again, 50 miners falling 4 kilometers to chase a 30-centimeter ribbon of gold. The deepest place a human can stand. The skin of the apple. If this journey changed how you think about the ground you are standing on, stay close. The next one goes somewhere the drills have never been, and this time, the water down there is still liquid.